So has anybody gone cross-country skiing? Yeah, quite a few. Well, those who have understand the benefits of skiing on a well-used trail. And cross-country skiing, I can say that, is easiest when we ski in established, deeply grooved, well-worn tracks. And straying from those well-worn, deeply used tracks into new snow, that's really hard work. Creating a new path is incredibly difficult, and the more snow there is, the harder it is to do. So most of us who have gone cross-country skiing do so by finding a well-groomed trail that is well used so we can follow the deeply grooved tracks that somebody else did the hard work of establishing. And the more we ski on those tracks, the deeper the grooves become and the easier the skiing becomes. Our thoughts follow a similar pattern. We get used to thinking about things in a particular way. And those who know about brains say that our brains get used to following a particular thought pathway. And the more we use that particular thought pathway, the better we are at maintaining that particular thought pathway, and the harder it is to change our thoughts. For instance, I grew up in a household that didn't have a whole lot of money. And I learned that lesson quite young when I wanted the same toy that one of my friends had. So my mom sat down with me with a dollar bill in one hand and 36 cents in coins in the other hand. And she said every time the two dads came home with their paycheck, my friend's dad had $1 and my dad had 36 cents. Now, they both worked really hard, but that's just the difference in what they were paid. My friend could afford to buy the toy, I could not. Well, without prompting, I came to the conclusion that my family was poor. Now, let's be clear. I never missed a meal. I never went without shoes. I always had clothes. We took one vacation every year. But I came to the conclusion that we couldn't have as much as my friend's family, so we were poor. And the more I compared myself to others, the more convinced I became that we were poor. And I developed an attitude of scarcity. The attitude of scarcity, believing that there's not enough, kept me from recognizing how blessed I really am for a very long time. Now, I'm not alone in learning to compare myself to others. Most of us have been trained to compare ourselves to others. And a lot of times it doesn't take much to convince ourselves that we're poor because we don't have as much as those other people. Every time we open a magazine, every time we turn on the television, every time we look at a commercial online, every time we look at what somebody else is wearing, we can convince ourselves that we don't have as much as they do, therefore, we must be kind of poor. Every time we compare ourselves to other people, we can become convinced that we don't have as much. Every time we look at a Facebook post from a friend, well, that's a great way to convince ourselves that our lives just aren't as much fun as somebody else's. Every time we let our thoughts ski down those tracks of scarcity, of not having as much, we dig those ruts deeper and deeper until we convince ourselves we're poor. And we learn to live with an attitude of scarcity, the belief that there just isn't enough. And then we go and hear Jesus say that the poor are blessed. Well, it's hard to believe that God has blessed us when we believe that we are poor, when we believe that we don't have enough. It's hard to believe that we can count on God's blessings when we have trained ourselves to live with an attitude of scarcity. We become convinced we don't have enough of anything. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough abilities. We don't have enough money to care for ourselves, much less having time, abilities, or money to care for anybody else. And our attitude of scarcity, that there's not enough, begins to become a rut that gets easier and easier to follow, deeper and deeper and harder to climb out. And we take that attitude of scarcity not just into our own lives, but into the lives of our congregation, the lives of our community, the lives of our nation. We begin to look at everything and say, there just isn't enough. Well, the reality is, friends, if we have food to eat every day, if we have a roof over our heads, if we have more than one set of clothing, if we have one pair of shoes, and if we have a way of transportation other than walking, we have more than 99% of the people in the world. If we have any time at all for leisure, we have more than most of the people in the world. If we have reliable, affordable, relative term, affordable health care, we have more than 40 million people in our nation. In other words, most of us don't just have enough, we have more than enough. Even so, most of us find it really easy to follow those ruts that tell us we don't have enough, that tell us we are living with scarcity, to live with an attitude of scarcity. We don't have enough time, we don't have enough abilities, we don't have enough money, we can barely take care of ourselves, much less of taking care of anybody else. Climbing out of the rut of scarcity thinking is not easy. It's just as hard as creating a new cross-country track through the deep snow. It takes work, it takes intention, it takes practice. But it can be done. Learning to live with an attitude not of scarcity but of abundance means learning to recognize the blessings that we have received from God. And as long as we allow ourselves to ski down the ruts of scarcity, we will fail to recognize all of the blessings that God has given us. Rather than thanking God for everything we have, we tend to ignore everything that God has done for us. An attitude of scarcity is similar to sitting down in a restaurant and being served a ribeye steak dinner with all the fixings, and then complaining because we stopped for a fast food burger before we got to the meal. God offers us that ribeye steak dinner every single day, and most of us settle for stopping at the fast food place for a burger. We begin changing our somebody said, no, we don't. We begin changing, okay, fillet of fish, I don't care. We begin changing our attitudes from scarcity to abundance with some very simple actions. First, stop watching commercials. Stop paying attention to what commercials say. Put them on mute. Click to a different station. Turn off the TV. Stop looking at Facebook comparing ourselves to what others do instead of saying, oh man, how could they afford to do that? Oh man, look at all the fun they're having. Oh man, I don't do anything. Instead of looking at what other people are doing and reporting, recognizing that they're cherry picking the best moments of their lives. And we could do that too. We just don't. We fail to see it. We're settling for the burger. And the other thing that we can do is stop comparing ourselves to others, because it only creates an inflated sense of self or a sense of scarcity. So friends, put the phone down. And then let's remember to offer thanks. Praying every time we eat is an excellent way to remember that God has provided every morsel of food that we eat. Now granted, somebody has been there from field to table, but God is the one who has given us that food. We're not living in a time of drought. We're not living in a time of famine. We are living in a time when there's plenty of food to feed us. As long as somebody reminded us the truckers keep working, we'll have enough. Whether it's a meal or a snack, learning to thank God for our food is a really simple way to start saying, thank you, God, and changing that attitude of scarcity to one of an attitude of abundance. We live in a day and time when our bodies and minds have the ability to perform tasks that are valued enough to earn an income. And thanking God for those things we currently take for granted puts us on a path of an attitude of abundance rather than an attitude of scarcity. Early on, when I got out of seminary and I was sharing ministry with 3 small churches in Waukesha County, we took the confirmation class to a traditional black worship service in a very small storefront church in a neighborhood in Milwaukee that was kind of frightening. And in those times, I was living with a deep attitude of scarcity. I had school loans, I wasn't making that much money, I was living in a parsonage where, well, I didn't worry about radon because there were plenty of cracks in the windows. An old asked to stand up and pray. And this is a guy who didn't appear like he had very much. He was wearing a simple white shirt that had clearly seen better days. His black pants, well, they were quite a bit worn. And like I said, he was worshiping in a part of Milwaukee that suffered from, well, what we now politely call urban blight, in a church that was clearly just getting by. He worshiped in a part of Milwaukee where the members of the congregation met us out on the street and escorted us into the church so that we wouldn't be in danger of being victims of crime. Now, I myself had some thoughts about what he might pray for. I thought he'd probably ask God to bring justice and prosperity to his part of the city. I just graduated from seminary, you see. I thought he would ask God to provide a building that was a bit more grand. I thought he would ask God for more. But I was wrong. Instead, this man got up and began thanking God for the ability to tie his shoes, and to button his shirt, and to buckle his very worn belt. And he continued thanking God for a really, really long time for things that I thought were really, really small. And after spending a long time thanking God for the small things, he started thanking God for bigger things. He thanked God for a warm and dry place to worship. I was looking around, it wasn't all that great. He thanked God for the ability to help his wife get out of bed every day and into her wheelchair and to get dressed so that she could stay at home. He thanked God for all of the blessings their church was able to offer to their community. That man prayed quite the prayer. And 33 years later, I still remember that prayer. And one of the things those of us attending learned was that about his prayer, or from his prayer, was the importance of thanking God for all of our blessings, starting with the smallest, simplest of things. Because the only way we're going to break out of the ruts of scarcity are by breaking tracks in new snow and thanking God for all of the blessings that we have received. And the ability to tie our own shoes may not seem like much until we can't tie our own shoes. The ability to button our shirt may not seem like much until our hands don't work and we can't button that shirt. Our ability to walk down an aisle or down a street may not seem like much until we don't have the ability to walk down the street. Once we start recognizing how very incredibly blessed each of us is by starting with the small, simplest things first, the more we begin to recognize how incredibly blessed we are. And we start to lose that attitude of scarcity and recognize that God has blessed us with an abundance, an incredible abundance of skills and abilities, an incredible abundance of time, an incredible abundance of stuff. And the day we recognize how incredibly blessed we are and begin to live with that attitude of abundance, that's the day that we can start to become a blessing for others. That's the day we begin to believe that we are so richly blessed, we can share with those who don't have the ability to tie their shoes. We can share with those who don't have shoes. We can share with those who don't have books or the ability to read them. We can share with those who don't have clean water in their villages. We can share with those who don't have the ability to see the doctor. The day we believe we have enough is the day when we will recognize that we are so blessed, we can be a blessing to everyone around us. The day we stop feeling poor is the day we can start changing the lives of those around us who really are poor. Amen.